for the people who might pay for it. There might be obvious alternatives that are basically just as good or even cheaper. There might be ways that it's being solved today that are basically fine. You might have no advantages over other people trying to create this. And this might be the moment of maximum disillusionment. That's the time when people start thinking, maybe I shouldn't work on it. On the other hand, this set of questions helps you think about the questions you need to answer. This focuses you on the things that you need to work on as a founder. And if you're a great engineer, that's why building tech can be some of the best ways to do that. You can find a moat, a reason to be that might make it a lot better, cheaper, or faster than all the alternatives. If you're a technologist, being able to use technology to be your moat is sort of the bread and butter, right? The best examples are things that basically have never happened before. Standard cognition is a great example of this because they have a pure technology moat. They're actually putting to practice a new method that has never been commercialized before. And as a result, they have something that even Amazon cannot duplicate. They can provide cashless checkout for a price that is 1/10 the cost, possibly 1/100th the cost of state-of-the-art that's out there right now. But that's not the only way for this to actually come together. One example from my own past was Posterous, actually. Posterous, if you don't remember, was a dead simple email platform that let you email one email address, post@posterous.com. And this itself was a brand new thing that nobody else had ever tried. The main reason was that people thought that security-wise, it wasn't possible to provide a good experience that way. That's why people always had sort of secret password 123@flickr.com. Posterous was doing, on day one, a thing that people thought was not possible. But we did it using pretty simple software. It wasn't machine learning. Frankly, it was if statements. If we received an email from you before, we asked you to confirm it. Once you confirmed it, we knew that that path of email was going to be safe. And that simple innovation from my co-founder, Sachin Agarwal, was enough to be a great moat for us. Nobody else tried to copy us right off the bat because they couldn't figure out the thing that we had figured out. That was enough for us to become a top 200 site and do it in a way where we weren't sort of fending off 1,000 other copycats. So yeah, there's not just one way to get this moat. What was true for us in 2008 remains true today. Without that moat, without that reason to be, without that thing that other people did not have, we didn't have a good reason to exist. We could take this technological limitation, which is anti-spoof technology, and use it to be enough of a moat to get our first hundreds of thousands of users. And that's a thing that you can do too. Maybe not exactly that, but that's the shape of something that you should be looking for when you're working on a new startup. It's just prudent to ask, why me? What do I have that nobody else has? And if that answer is nothing, you've got to keep working. Thanks for watching.
So, time to reflect. Why you and why now? If you want to set up a founder startup, are there any compelling reasons in the market why people will buy only from you and nobody else? Find an answer to that. So that brings us to this wonderful word, which is not there in academic textbooks. We use a term called unmet need. But the apt word is the pain point. Right? So how do you discover a pain point? I mean, you may know your pain point, but when you have a solution, you feel that everybody else has the pain, and it is not clearly the case. So you may have an idea, and then you feel that there are a lot of pain points, and from there you have to zero down on one pain point. So how do we traverse that journey? So there are three sets of ideas, three types of ideas. There's a glamorous idea. Everybody is going after it. A few years ago, it was blockchain-based something. Right? Everybody had in GOG those days, whenever we went, that was the first phase of our Startup Gujarat scheme. And everybody had a lot of blockchain-related ideas. Right? And so much so that one day Mamta Verma said, I'm fed up with this blockchain thing now. Right? And then there is a popular idea, popular because you have seen a video on YouTube and a lot of likes are there. So you said it's there in America, let me do it here. And the smarter thing is an easy idea. I can pull it off, so let me do it. Perhaps, hopefully, nobody would have seen that idea. But then nobody thinks in terms of, is this idea needed? And it may not be easy, it may not be popular, it may not be glamorous, but it may have money in it. Let us see how we can scout for an idea. Let us see the first set of suggestions. How ideas come into.
The new startup ideas that really work tend to take only a few forms: new tech, new behavior change in society, or new regulation. As you think about whether you want to work on a startup idea, whether it's starting.
Let that sink in. A new trend is there, behavioral trend is there. These days, you put a camera in front of anybody and you start shaking. Everybody likes to dance. I mean, if a child is crying and you put a camera just in front of the child, she will stop crying.
New startup ideas that really.
So that's a new trend. So can you capitalize on it? There's a new regulation coming. You may not, I mean, maybe you were very little kids when that happened, that government took a decision that all the bikes should have indicator lights. Earlier, the bikes did not have indicator lights. And that deadline for that had to be extended because India did not have capacity for manufacturing the indicator lights. But regulation created that market and therefore the business. Right? Similarly, climate tech. You have Basel IV norms. So if you see some regulation coming, why this Poonawalla did that? Somehow we could see that COVID is going to happen, and they had a huge stock of what is it called? Yes, Covishield. So somehow we could see.
Yourself or deciding whether to work at a startup. I want you to ask what great investors ask themselves all the time when they meet a startup. New behavior change in society now? Or new regulation. As you think about whether you want to work on a startup idea, whether it's starting it yourself or deciding whether to work at a startup, I want you to ask what great investors ask themselves all the time when they meet a startup. Why now? The whole reason why there's opportunity in startups is actually technology. And technology progresses on a curve, linear, superlinear, and exponential. Here's Lex Friedman and Ray Kurzweil talking about being able to predict the future through technology.
I mean, I did OCR in the 1970s.
Optical character recognition.
Yeah, so we were able to do that in the 70s, and I waited till the 80s to address speech recognition, since that requires more computation.
So you were thinking through timing when you're developing those things.
Yeah.
Has its time come?
Today we're talking about why now, because that is the key question. In given tech curves, you can predict when things
and I waited till the 80s to address speech recognition, since that requires more computation.
So you were thinking through timing when you're developing those things.
Yeah.
Has its time come?
Today we're talking about why now, because that is the key question. And given tech curves, you can predict
become viable. The way Kurzweil did, when he pioneered optical character recognition and speech recognition. Today, the frontiers probably revolve around things like large AI language models, computer vision, blockchains, but they might actually still be some of the oldest ones out there, like mobile phone adoption, the number of transistors on a chip. These are all powerful technologies that are driving new things that human beings are now capable of doing. And when you start a startup, or you're trying to evaluate a startup, it's one of the best things to evaluate. And let's take a concrete example. Almost anyone can look at a smartphone today and say, wow, that really changed the world. But what you might not know is that for many, many years, even a decade before the successful iPhone debut, there were attempts like this one.
It was a telephone. It was essentially going to be a smartphone with a lot of intelligence.
When we were talking about reinventing telephony, we meant it.
We're trying to make something that people love. We need it to be like your watch, your glasses, your wallet.
We decided to make it. That meant we were custom building every piece. It's insane.
Someday, dictates your wristwatch.
This was the beginning of what became, I think, the most important company to come out of Silicon Valley that nobody's ever heard of.
That was a clip from a great movie called General Magic, named after, of course, the company that tried to make a smartphone at the moment that the tech was not ready yet. And here's what that looked like. In 1994, this device cost $1,400. It had only 1 megabyte of RAM, a 4800 baud modem, which is about 480 bytes per second, and they had a monthly data fee of $400 per month. 13 years later, Apple and Steve Jobs delivered the iPhone 1.
Well, what we're going to do is get rid of all these buttons and just make a giant screen. A giant screen.
The iPhone 1 cost $499. It had 16 gigabytes of storage and 2.5G cell network, which was about 300 kilobytes per second. So about 16,000x the storage, 600 times faster network, and it cost one-third the price. In tech, orders of magnitude improvement is not just possible, it's actually the key to breakthrough. The most powerful things you could work on come on the back of not a 50% or 2x improvement, but on 16,000x better, 600x. Look for the 10x, look for the 100x. That's why tech is the most powerful thing, because it is the driver for those 10x, 100x, and 1000x improvements that change things and leave them changed forever. Why now? Sometimes the answer is it literally can only be done now. That was true for the iPhone, and that is a perfect storm. Now, technology is huge, but the next why now, once technology is broadly available, is actually the human mass behavior change that happens. The smartphone was an amazing business that was hard won by Apple and Google in the end, but that's often just the beginning. These technological innovations stack. Here is a graph of smartphone adoption as a percentage of population. And so you can see that the smartphone went from something that was very fringe, not a lot of people had it, to suddenly everyone had it. And right around 2012 was when Instacart happened. That's the grocery delivery startup that I funded when I was at Y Combinator. The founder sent me a 6-pack of beer, and I said, what the heck is this? I downloaded it, and I saw the future literally right before my eyes in my iPhone. It's a huge part of Initialized's first fund, and it's returned whole funds several times off of that one investment. But to know why now for Instacart, you actually have to understand the history that happened right before it. You have to look at WebDAM, which was a huge failure that raised over $396 million from Sequoia, Benchmark, and yes, even SoftBank. This was 1997, so literally 25 years ago. The company ended up losing over $800 million and shutting down in June 2001, which really marked one of the last gasps of Web 1.0. When Instacart came around 11 years later, people were wondering, why now? And it turned out to be one of the most powerful why nows I've ever seen up close.
What has changed today and why this is the first time in history where a company like Instacart is actually possible is because smartphone penetration. There hasn't been a time where smartphones are so prevalent that everyone has them, and as a result of that, we're able to utilize the people who have them to pick and deliver the groceries. So when you want to order groceries, we connect you with someone who can pick those groceries and deliver them to your door. So this is the same reason why Uber and Lyft exist today when they couldn't have existed 10 years ago. So we think in our opinion it's actually price, selection, and convenience. All three of those are important. It's not just one thing. And with Instacart, I think that customers can get all three of those.
Today, Instacart has been churning out profit, and it's a household name. Their software eating all of grocery, and they wrote a why now that was also the driving force for Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash, all multi-billion-dollar startups today. Funny story, my partner Kim Cutler actually wrote the first article in 2012 on TechCrunch about Lyft's pivot into the first citizen driver service. This was even before Uber did UberX. Before that, Lyft was called Zimride, and they were a ride-sharing app that let people do long-haul rides better than posting on Craigslist. Zimride becoming Lyft was the pivot of a century, and all because it was behavior that drove a giant why now. Suddenly, big mobile workforces were not just possible, they became huge billion-dollar industries. Now, I'm a technologist, and we may love technology, but I have to admit, there's a very powerful type of behavior change that is a third kind of why now, and it might be a bit foreign to you and me, but it's still a key driver of why certain startups can happen at certain times. I can't think of a more extreme example of this than actually Uber. Here's Bradley Tusk, famously one of the people behind getting Uber approved in many cities, including Washington, D.C., the primary American power center of them all.
We started in 2012 in D.C., actually. So we launched DC was going well, and then taxi's typical thing. They got a member of the city council to put in a bill, basically that would outlaw Uber. And at the time, we didn't know if this would work or not, but we sent an email from Travis to all of our customers saying, look, if you like this thing and you want to keep using it, we need your help. And in the course of a week, 50,000 people organically, reached out to the city council and said, I want this thing. And not only did we kill the bad bill, we passed our bill. Unanimously, including voted for it by the sponsor of the bad bill. Who voted for us.
Regulation is a crazy double-edged sword. It can limit and destroy your business just as much as it can support it and make it possible. Working with the government is like any other enterprise partner, only way more fraught. They're the elephant, and they can either raise you up or crush you. Your job as a founder is to find the former and avoid the latter. When I was at Y Combinator, I remember meeting Parker Conrad when he was working on one of his first startups, Zenefits. And the thing that really jumped out at me in his YC application was actually one of the big reasons I wanted to fund it. He had pointed out that Obamacare was about to roll out, and that meant that millions of small businesses and medium-sized businesses would be mandated to offer health insurance. That turned out to be a megatrend need that drove huge adoption of not just Zenefits, but Gusto, and yes, even Parker Conrad's new decacorn startup, Ripley. When the government comes and says X needs to happen, there's a wave of business activity that is going to rush towards that thing. And if you can spot that before it happens, it'll be you who figures that out first. Now, if you ask what's the why now right now when it comes to regulation, I'd say the biggest enduring one facing us today is climate change. Here's initialized investor and partner Kim Cutler, who wrote that first Lift article on TechCrunch back in the day. This is what she sees in this space.
In my lifetime, I've never seen a moment where the political consensus around climate change has never been more urgent, more obvious, more inescapable than right now.
It doesn't take much to realize climate change is happening all around us, whether it's wildfires, record temperatures, or storms, the likes of which we've never seen. And there's change afoot now in DC and the halls of power.
And so those climate disasters, those effectively man-made climate disasters, created the political will for the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the first of its kind, the largest climate package the United States has ever done, has ever seen before, and that's going to lead to lots of different incentives around decarbonizing our entire economy in the way that Americans live. And that's a huge opportunity for entrepreneurs to latch onto right now.
One of the hottest startups in Silicon Valley today is the one Kim led a Series A in called Pano, which is fighting wildfires, one of the worst disasters plaguing the American West. And it's something computer vision is here to solve.
We had a policy of the last 100 years of suppression, where we didn't allow any fires to be put out by the early morning every day. And so we've accumulated this huge fuel load over the last 100 years that in combination with higher aridity because of climate change is setting off these megafires. And so we're going to have to head towards this world where we're actually having more managed low intensity fires versus uncontrollable, unpredictable megafires. And to do that, you're going to have like a lot of tech, frankly, to do it. That's going to have to be, situational awareness from smart cameras that can identify smoke plumes and triangulate where fires are and how fast they're spreading across the terrain. We're going to have to do that going forward. And Pano, which is the deal that we did the Series A for, is part of that. They're a network of computer vision-enabled cameras monitoring huge amounts of terrain across multiple continents, Australia and there, helping first responders, utilities, and private landowners figure out how to identify and manage wildfire on land.
Pano is going to be a huge business that solves a giant societal problem. Kim Cutler is an amazing investor when it comes to this third kind of finding startups with a strong why now. Because governments are one of the largest forces in our lives, like it or not. And where that works to a founder's favor is that unlike big tech that's totally opaque, unlike private corporations, governments are generally built to be open systems with governance and policies that, when done right, are transparent to everyone, including you. Regulation is the largest, hairiest, and most difficult to handle why now for any startup, but it's the one you should always be aware of. You might not be interested in the government, but the government is interested in you. Technology, behavior change, and government regulation. Those are my 3 why nows I want you to keep in your mind as you evaluate any startup idea. Those aren't the only 3, but those are the ones that I have seen up close, and we've funded dozens of billion-dollar startups that have made it based on those 3. Wired writer Paul Ford says, watch for the curious and interesting intersections between very large things. Look for the points of contact or points of conflict. Pick 2 enormous forces and wonder how they connect. And where those intersect is the one big question. Why now? That's why we're here, and that's why I'm so glad you found my videos. That's why I hope we can get there together. I want you, yes you, to be the creator of a better future for all of us. Technology continues to change our world. And if you can build that technology, you can be the lever on that fulcrum that moves everything. This is the mission. You can get the skills. You can build your people networks. You can learn how to do this and on the right path. If you ask the right questions, product market fit will find you. Alan Kay says, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. What future will you invent? Let's go get it. So that's it for this week. I've actually made almost 100 videos that help you on your journey to be a founder, builder, or manager. We live in a fallen world that won't.
So little later when we discuss your individual ideas, these are the three variables I would want you to look at. Technology, regulation, and behavior change, intersection of that, and the CONU of your development that you are doing, cost of not using. Because that is one variable which will create a compelling reason for anybody to adopt it, right? So these are the three things we'll look at. Next. Mind you, these are all billionaires. Like, they are not just startup people. They've made a lot of money. So listen to them very, very carefully. Copy it and I just copy this and paste it. Is it not possible to copy? It cannot be copied. All right, I have another.
So let's.
Right click. This is not. Link is there. Did I get my listen to it?
Hello, TEDsters. This is actually my third TED 3-minute talk, and it's great to be able to share my research, but you know, being known as the 3-minute guy is not always a good thing. Now, TED is all about ideas I'll try that over. Now, TED is all about ideas worth spreading. But many people think, I could never have an idea worth spreading. I'm not creative or artsy or a genius. Well, the good news is, anyone can have super ideas. And the interesting thing is that many great ideas come when people do surprisingly simple things. So let's look at 4 simple ways to have super ideas. One is have a problem, because ideas are solutions to everyday problems. Richard Branson told me he had a problem. He was stranded in the airport after his flight to Puerto Rico was canceled. And to solve the problem, he got on the phone, called around, chartered a plane, sold tickets to the other stranded passengers, and actually ended up making a profit. The light went on, I could start an airline. And the idea for Virgin Atlantic was born. Sam Smith had a problem. He was really heartbroken after his lover left him. And then he thought, well, to get over it, I'll write about it. The light went on, and the idea for a song called Stay With Me was born. It went on to win 4 Grammy Awards and Song of the Year. So Sam went from very heartbroken to very happy, and the idea solved his problem. Number 2, listen, because ears are Wi-Fi for ideas. Dr. Gene Carruthers was injecting a patient's eyelids with Botox to stop muscle spasms. And the patient asked, why didn't you inject my forehead? Gene said, you don't have spasms there. The patient said, I know, but every time you inject my forehead, I get this beautiful, untroubled expression.
And the patient asked, why didn't you inject my forehead?
The light went on, and she had the idea to use Botox to reduce frown lines and wrinkles. One comment,
and from that one
by millions and valued at billions, came around that's now used by millions and valued at billions.
around.
Number 3, look
Richard
around.
Feynman was a physicist eating lunch in the
Cornell
University cafeteria. And a student stood up and threw a plate across the room. Those crazy students. And Richard noticed as the plate spun through the air, the Cornell medallion on the plate seemed to be spinning faster than the plate. Well, he went away, got an idea, worked out the motion of the mass particles, whatever they are. And he said, looking at that plate was what won his Nobel Prize. Gee, I look at a plate and all I see is food. He looks at a plate and wins the Nobel Prize. So when it comes to ideas, IQ, spelled E-Y-E, often wins over IQ. As Marilyn Bossavant says, and she holds a Guinness record for highest IQ, to acquire knowledge one must study, but to acquire wisdom one must observe. Or as Warren Buffett says, I always believe my eyes rather than anything else. And now the biggest secret for super ideas, could I have a drum roll please? Oh, that's not bad. Come on, one more time. Wait, yeah, I have to introduce you. Okay, one more time. A drum roll, please. Whoa, now that's what I call a drum roll. The important thing is write down your ideas, because if you don't, they'll fly away never to return. Larry Page says, when I was 23, I suddenly woke up thinking, what if we could download the whole web and just keep the links? I grabbed a pen and started scribbling out the details, and Google was born. When a really great dream shows up, grab it. So if you are dreaming of a great idea, forget being artsy or creative or genius. Just be yourself, do some 3-minute talk. And it's great to be able to share my research. But, you know, being known as the 3-minute guy is not always a good thing. Now, TED is all about ideas I'll try that over. Now, TED is all about ideas worth spreading. But many people think, I could never have an idea worth spreading. I'm not creative or artsy or a genius. Well, the good news is, anyone can have super ideas. And the interesting thing is that many great ideas come when people do surprisingly simple things. So let's look at 4 simple ways to have super ideas.
Sort of things
One
overlap.
is have a problem.
So in some
Because ideas
sense,
are solutions to everyday
doing well
problems.
by doing good is my
Richard
philosophy.
Branson told me he
That
had a
means
problem.
you can create a
He
great
was stranded
venture,
in the
and if
airport
the
after his
venture
flight
can
to Puerto
do
Rico
good,
was canceled.
That becomes a philanthropic venture
And to
from my
solve the problem,
perspective.
he got
So
on
to
the
me,
phone,
you
called
can't
around,
create a $10
chartered a
billion
plane,
company by
sold
solving
tickets
a
to the
$1
other
billion
stranded
problem.
passengers,
That
and
means you
actually
have to
ended
go
up
out
making
and
a
solve
profit.
$100 billion problem. And it so happens those $100 billion problems are massive social problems, which are education, the healthcare, the clean water, the energy. And if you can go provide access to education and healthcare to billions of people around the world, and if you happen to make $1 billion profit, my hat's off to you. That's a great venture, and that's what we want people to do, is not to separate doing well from doing good, because you can do both, and that's how you create scalable, sustainable change.
Earlier, Melinda Gates was mentioning that even with all the combined amount.
Yes. So one of the domains that he is mentioning is healthcare. And I believe most of you will fall into that. So there is a potential of creating $1 billion company there. If you play your cards well, if you do the research well, and as the earlier speaker said, IQ, you need to observe more. Now that technology is given.
Amount of money that we have here at the Fourth.
So to begin with, zero down on that one problem which is keeping you awake at nights. Is any problem there, first of all, or is it just the technology that you were working on in your doctoral program that is keeping you awake? Is that a real problem? Something which aggravates you? See, pain point has 2 characteristics. One is people are actively Secondly, desperately looking for the solution that you have developed. One problem which is keeping you awake at night. Secondly, you have to look at whether people are actively and desperately looking for it. Or is it going to be the case which Naveen Jain was telling, that I think you are having a pain right now, please take our aspirin. That's what we all did as medical representative, right? Have you ever gone along with a medical representative to a doctor?
Most importantly, that may be in terms of a scale. How many are looking actively in that? If you are targeting individual pains, a single person is looking into it, or very niche sector, actually the extent of the problem got started.
Yes, so that is what Naveen Jain was telling. You can't have a billion-dollar company if the problem you are addressing is not a billion-dollar problem, right? How many of you have visited a doctor like a medical representative? Do you know what a medical representative, who a medical representative is? You're not familiar with the term medical representative? No, I'm surprised. I mean, how many of you know pharmaceutical? Have you heard of the term pharmaceutical company? They sell medicines. How do they sell it? How does a doctor come to prescribe a particular brand of paracetamol? Yeah, so they are called, yes. Yes.
Particular job class is known as a medical.
Yes. So have you ever seen a pharmaceutical representative? All right. Or else, what else have you noticed?
Sample things, gifting and other.
Gifting. Okay, then. Okay, unethical things he's talking about is also true, by the way.
Sample based.
Yes. But what essential communication does he do? Commission. Okay. What else? He carries something known as visual aid file, something like this, and he's showing the brand, talking about indications, contraindications, and then he says, please prescribe this. Right? Because unlike most other products, doctor prescribes, he does not partake the medicine himself. Right? So, for most other products, you go to the customer and tell him you are having a pain, take it here. Doctor knows how many patients he is getting for paracetamol. And your job is to convince him to switch to because the cost of the treatment is more affordable. The Kono is better. Kono is more with the company. Right? So first, look at the problem which is you are passionate about. But again, in one of the other videos, Naveen Jain has made a very poignant statement. He says, passion is for losers. You have to be obsessed with something if you really want to make it. So begin with self-reflection. To some extent, you people are better aligned because most of you are assuming that has to do something at least with some obsession. Right? And then, do you see a regulation coming up which will make acceptance of your product easy? Is there a behavioral pattern emerging in the environment? If everybody is watching mobiles at night, lying down, is it going to lead to some more diseases which you can solve? Right? So that is where it will come up. Are people actively and desperately looking for the solution which you have? If they are not actively looking for it, if they are not desperately looking for it, what will happen is when you go to sell it and you send your calling card, the decision maker is going to tell you, "Bahar bithao, we are busy." All you might be doing is chatting with somebody. Why? Because it's not a pain point. The konu that he has is very less because of not using your innovation. So he's not really bothered. He's one of the options. In most traditional business, being one of the option is also a business opportunity, which we'll take a little later. But since you are a startup, low on money, you have to be on the knowledge intensive side and make some good money fast. So these are the characteristics of a real pain point: anxiety, urgency, and when both the two things are there, they should be willing to give you an advance. You should, when you make a pitch for it, somebody should tell, okay, don't let this guys go out. Either buy their technology, give them an advance, tie them up. If that is not happening, it's a red flag. Right? See, we are a very polite society. Right? So if I were to ask the group here, am I not more handsome than Shah Rukh Khan? How many of you will say no on my face? Behind my back is a different thing. But supposing our cars bang, and then the truth will come out immediately on the face. So there are issues with traditional market research, which relies on asking questions, simple questions. And that is where what I call qualitative research comes in, which we'll talk about in detail a little later. This way, always keep in mind that if people are buying drill bit today, that does not mean that they want a drill bit. All they want is a hole, right? And there could be various technologies which can create that hole. This phenomenon is known as marketing myopia. Way back in 16, the Professor Theodore Levitt has written about it. So I'll give you a story about this medicine. Should I call it medicine? It's for anti-ulcer ointment. Rickett and Ben Kaiser, I think, launched it way back in 80s, late 80s. It was called Gelora. So a very senior representative in Surat was a good friend of mine. So when they launched it, I was standing with him. And there are two jobs with the medical representative, the pharmaceutical salesman does. One is he generates prescriptions by convincing the doctor or requesting the doctor. And then he has to see to it that the product that he is having is available at the retail point in the medical stores. So the retailer has to go to the distributor and buy it and stock it. And the retailers are very reluctant there because their working capital gets blocked in one more product. Right? And when you deal with multinationals, the distributors of multinationals do not sell on what is known as on consignment basis. Consignment basis is that you take the product now and pay it to us. Most of the distributors will say, give us a blank check if you want 10 packets, we'll write down the money, take the check, and then only we'll deliver. So therefore, this guy was having an issue. And right at how many of you are from Surat, right? So there's this area called Lalgate. So there are 2, 3, 4 medical stores there, right on the opposite side of the police station, near Musa Chasma Wala. So we were standing there, and this guy was trying to convince this chap, ek packet lekar rakh lo, I'm going to meet that doctor, and immediately he'll start prescribing. So that man told in typical Gujarati ki awa ghana bada joya. There was this doctor, now deceased, called Motala, Dr. Motala. He says he will not pick up a product even if you are from multinationals so soon. Tamara boot gasai jese pachi lakhwanu sharu karsh. But in any case, a lot of other companies also have this anti-ulcer ointment. So what he did very smartly, Now, pharmaceutical industry, you give samples to the doctors so that he tries it out on patients and then he takes to your product. So that sample was meant for Dr. Motala. He gives it to this ointment because what this medical store guy. Now what the objection he had was મને પણ અલ્સર છે ને કંઈ ચાલતું નથી આ એમ પણ બધી બેકાર વસ્તુ. So he gives this ointment tube to him. એ હું સિગરેટ પીને આવું છું. He goes for a fag and within minutes the results are there. And immediately this guy buys 10 packets, 10 into 10 with 100. Right? Why? Because they addressed the pain point. Pain point was there. People had medicines, but none of them was working that fast. And in certain types of problems, you want instant relief. We are not talking of side effects it would have. But instant relief is there. Anybody who had an ulcer would know how distressing it is. Right? So suddenly that Konu become irrelevant there. Instant relief was an issue, which he gave. The stocking problem was done. All then he had to do was narrate the same story to the doctor. He said, phone karina puche lo. And the rest was history. So how do you find this pain point? The traditional thing is you look at the secondary data, you do observation, IQ, as Richard was telling, and most importantly, what I call industrial gossip. When you are into B2B marketing, you meet a lot of industrialists, right? And when you go there, like if there's a B2B sales guy coming in this GIDC, he will meet perhaps 5 different companies here, and everywhere he will kind of share information. Wahan gaya tha, ye hua, this, that. They are building this capacity. So that industrial gossip lets you know what is likely to happen. Like for example, in your pharmaceutical sector, if you have if those companies allow you to meet R&D directors, and if you happen to sit in the office and if you see that a certain journal is being referred to by him, it's a big indicator of what he might be thinking. So when you are a sales guy, you have to keep your antennas up. Journals are very expensive, all of you know. And when a particular focus journal is being subscribed to by this particular company, maybe they are thinking along a certain direction. And if you do a little research in what that issue, which is what you saw in the office, you would know what perhaps is there in their pipeline. And then if you keep an eye on what is being purchased, nobody will tell you what is being purchased. Like the practice is even the names, labels in the storerooms are changed. Right? So you have to perhaps track it at the transport office. What is being delivered there? Then you might know that what might come out in the market in next year or so, because they are doing some R&D along this, and you have to have your response ready. This is subject matter of the subject which we teach called strategic marketing. Like you have to keep an eye on the research pipelines of your competitors, because it may happen that you have launched something, you are launching something in 2 months, 3 months down the line, another product which is much better than what yours is might be hitting the market. So your entire investment is gone, right? So in research intensive industries, the risks are very high. Yes, but supposing you end up producing what is known as a Me Too product. The Me Too issue that you see, the original term is from marketing. Me Too product. मेरे पास भी है यही चीज. Then the question is, why should we buy from you? But then that is a good choice. Even if most of the businesses are Me Too products, and you have paracetamol called X brand, and a competitor comes up with the Y brand. Same thing with antibiotics. But they're still being sold on the basis of strength of the relationship of sales guys, right? So the strategic options you have is, you are a good option. उससे ले रहे हो, मेरा भी ले लो. क्यों ले लो? मैं आपसे मिलता हूँ, मैं आपको सैंपल दे रहा हूँ, And there are a lot of other deals, like you send them over conferences, you give them gifts. Glaxo's long back, and I'm talking of 80s. They were even paying salaries of receptionists. So those things, those are absolutely illegal things, but they were happening. But then you might decide, I want to be one of the preferences that this doctor has. So barrel gun and trigun. So when trigun was launched by, I think, Troika, they wanted to be one of the preferences. Jo barrel gun karta hai, mera bhi kar le, prescribe. So the first thing the representatives would do is find out from the doctor, is he prescribing barrel gun? Yes. Then barrel gun ka, trigun ka price itna hai. There is a different story on the branding side. Trigun bombed after the launch. The reason was every time that the representative took the name Trigun, what popped up in doctor's mind was barrel gun. So after the visit of a Trigun salesman, the sales of barrel gun went up. So hence there is a rule in branding that see to it that your brand name is nowhere near in sounding to your competitors. If it is black, it has to be white. Otherwise, what happens is this barrel gun. Third is you want to be absolutely the only choice. This is another strategic choice you have. And then you have to see that that pain point is closely met. The CONU is very high. And the business deal is very good. I mean, you give him all the credit he wants or whatever terms. Then you become the only choice. Right? So after MBA, I was into dispersed stuff selling. Dispersed dye stuff is a dye stuff color used for dyeing and printing on polyester fabrics. So I was working with the Marwadi group in Surat. Nova dye stuffs. They also have an industry somewhere in Ahmedabad also. So our hot selling product was a color called golden yellow GG. Technically Novalin golden yellow GG. We were selling it at 600 rupees per kg. The cost of production was 150 rupees. Right? So, and one of my biggest buyers was Kothari Sign Fab Private Limited. Arvind Bhai Kothari. We were quite friends. So I and an engineering friend of mine, one day we said, why not we start this? I mean, 150 rupees cost and 600 rupees is the sales price. So I said, before we get into this, let me ask a few customers if they'll buy from us. So like a smart elec, you heard the story of a smart elec, right? It was a horse who would kind of pick up the right. I mean, you make a choice and he will tell you this is a choice you made. So that story somewhere else. But like that smart horse, I asked him, Arvind Bhai, if we start this, will you buy it from us? He said, why not? But he knew that I was a raw guy. So he said, look, this was my business answer to you and I mean it. Tomorrow if you start your own company and I will certainly buy from you. But mind you, at that point of time, I will not be a friend of yours. I will be a businessman. So you already know that whatever you're buying, he was buying in tons. We make payment after 6 months. Right? And golden yellow GG, which I will buy, say, 5 tons. And I will not pay you for 6 months. You will not be able to withstand that unless you have very deep pockets. It was not a R&D based product. It was a running product required. So this is the decision that you have to make. This is another fallacy which I have seen over here. Marketing wala rakho,